palace halls echoed with screams as Princess Charlotte's crimson dress darkened with blood. She crumpled to the marble floor, her trembling hand reaching toward the frozen guard. His name escaped her pale lips in a desperate whisper, and the secret they'd buried for years shattered in that single moment. Every eye turned to him. Every royal protocol demanded he remain still, emotionless, invisible. But the woman he loved was dying at his feet, and the choice between duty and heart would cost him everything. This is their story, the forbidden love that bloomed in shadows and died in daylight. If you love emotional royal stories that'll make your heart race, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss these incredible tales, and share this with someone who loves dramatic twists. Trust me, you'll want to see how this unfolds. Let's dive in. James Worthington stood like a statue in the grand hallway of Windsor Palace. His black uniform was pressed perfectly. His shoes shined like mirrors. His face showed no feelings at all. This was his job. Royal guards were supposed to be invisible. They were supposed to watch everything but say nothing. They were supposed to protect the royal family without becoming part of their world. James had been doing this job for 12 years. He started when he was only 21 years old. Back then, he felt proud to wear the uniform. His mother cried happy tears when he got the position. His father shook his hand firmly. "You will serve the crown with honor," his father said. James promised he would. For the first 10 years, the job was easy. James stood in hallways. He walked through gardens. He checked doors and windows. He watched visitors come and go. The royal family walked past him like he was a piece of furniture. They never looked at him. They never spoke to him. He was just another guard in a building full of guards. But 2 years ago, everything changed. That was when he really saw Princess Charlotte for the first time. Charlotte was different from the other royals. She was the king's youngest daughter, third in line to the throne. Her older brother would be king someday. Her older sister would help him rule. Charlotte was the spare princess, the one nobody worried about too much. Maybe that was why she still had kindness in her eyes. She was 22 years old when James first noticed her. She walked through the east hallway every morning at 8 o'clock. Most royals ignored the guards completely. But Charlotte always nodded slightly when she passed. Sometimes she said "Good morning" in a soft voice. It was a small thing, but in the cold, silent palace, small kindnesses felt like warm sunlight. James never answered her greetings. Guards were not supposed to speak unless spoken to directly with a question. A simple "good morning" was not a question, so he stayed silent. But inside, his heart beat faster every time she walked by. The real change happened during the security lockdown. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. Someone called the palace with a bomb threat. It was probably fake, but the security team could not take chances. Alarms rang through the building. Guards rushed the royal family into safe rooms. These rooms had thick steel doors and no windows. They were designed to protect the royals during attacks. James was assigned to guard Princess Charlotte's safe room. He stood outside while she went inside. But then the security chief called his radio. "Worthington, get inside the room. We need guards inside every safe room until we clear the threat." James opened the heavy door and stepped inside. The room was small and plain. It had a table, 4 chairs, some water bottles, and a first aid kit. Charlotte sat at the table, looking at her phone. She looked up when James entered. "Oh," she said. "Hello." James nodded, but said nothing. He stood by the door, hands behind his back, eyes forward. "You can sit down if you want," Charlotte said. "This might take a while." "I am fine standing, Your Highness," James said. These were the first words he ever spoke directly to her. Charlotte smiled a little. "You have a nice voice. I always wondered what you would sound like." James did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. 1 hour passed, then 2 hours, then 3. The security team was checking every room in the massive palace. Charlotte tried to read on her phone, but the signal was blocked in the safe room. She looked bored. Then she looked tired. Then she looked lonely. "Can I ask you something?" Charlotte said suddenly. "Yes, Your Highness," James answered. "What is your name?" James hesitated. Guards did not usually share their names with royals. But she asked him directly. "James Worthington, Your Highness." "James," she repeated. "That is a good name. Do you like working here, James?" This was harder to answer. James chose his words carefully. "It is an honor to serve the crown, Your Highness." Charlotte laughed, but it was not a happy laugh. "That is what everyone says. But I asked if you like it." James looked at her for the first time. Really looked at her. Her eyes were green like summer leaves. Her hair was brown and pulled back simply. She wore a blue dress that looked expensive, but not fancy. She looked tired. She looked like she carried heavy weights that nobody else could see. "Sometimes," James said honestly, "I like the quiet. I like the routine. But sometimes it feels like being a ghost. People look through me instead of at me." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I know exactly what you mean." They talked for the next 3 hours. Charlotte asked about his life before the palace. James told her about growing up in a small town, about his 2 younger sisters, about how he wanted to be a teacher before he became a guard. Charlotte told him things too. She talked about how lonely the palace felt, about how she was engaged to marry Duke Edward, a man she barely knew, about how she loved reading but hated state dinners, about how she wanted to work at a charity helping children, but her mother said it was not appropriate for a princess. When the lockdown finally ended, they both stood up. Charlotte looked at James with soft eyes.
After the lockdown ended, James tried to forget the conversation in the safe room. He told himself it was just talking. Nothing more. He was a guard. She was a princess. Those were the facts. Facts could not change. But Charlotte did not forget. The next morning she walked through the east hallway at 8 o'clock like always. When she passed James she stopped. She looked directly at him. "Good morning, James," she said using his name. James felt his heart jump. Guards standing nearby looked surprised. Princesses did not use guard names. They did not stop to talk. "Good morning, Your Highness," James said, keeping his voice steady. Charlotte smiled and walked away. But something had started. Something neither of them could stop. The palace library became their secret place. It was a huge room filled with thousands of old books. Most royals never went there. They preferred watching television or using their computers. But Charlotte loved books. She went to the library 3 times every week. James was not assigned to guard the library, but he started taking his breaks there. He would sit in a corner, pretending to read. Charlotte would come in, choose a book, and sit at a table. They never sat together. They never spoke when others were around. But they were in the same room. That felt like enough. One day, James found a note inside a book he was reading. The book was about ocean exploration. The note said, "Do you dream about traveling?" See. James looked around. The library was empty except for an old clerk who was sleeping at his desk. James took out his pen. He wrote under Charlotte's words, "Every day. Do you, J?" He put the book back on the shelf where he found it. The next day it was gone. 3 days later the book appeared again. Inside was a new note. "I dream about being free. Just for one day. To walk outside without guards. To choose my own path. Is that silly?" See. James wrote back, "Not silly. Human. We all want to choose our own paths. J." This became their way of talking. They left notes in different books. Sometimes the notes were simple. "How are you today?" or "I hope you are well." Sometimes the notes were deeper. Charlotte wrote about feeling trapped. About her upcoming wedding to Duke Edward. About how she felt like a doll being moved around by other people's hands. James wrote about his life too. About missing his family. About feeling invisible. About wondering if he would spend his whole life watching other people live while he stood still. The notes went on for months. 6 months. Then 8 months. They learned everything about each other through words on paper. Charlotte loved rain and chocolate and old poetry. James loved morning coffee and jazz music and starry nights. Charlotte was afraid of disappointing her family. James was afraid of becoming old and realizing he never really lived. Then came the day in the garden. It was September, and the palace gardens were full of red and gold leaves. Charlotte was walking the stone paths with 2 lady attendants. James was part of the security detail, walking 20 steps behind. The attendants were talking to each other, not paying attention to Charlotte. Charlotte stopped at a fountain. She pretended to look at the water. She dropped her handkerchief like an accident. The white cloth fell onto the ground near James's feet. James picked it up. He walked forward to return it. When he handed it to Charlotte, their fingers touched for just 1 second. It was the first time they had ever touched. That 1 second felt like electricity. "Thank you," Charlotte whispered, so quietly only James could hear. "Always," James whispered back. The attendants did not notice anything. But that small touch changed everything. After that day they found more moments. A brush of hands when James opened a door for her. A long look across a crowded room. Once, during a rainy afternoon, they were both in the library alone. Charlotte stood by a window watching the rain. James walked over and stood beside her. They did not touch. They did not speak. But they stood together for 5 whole minutes, watching the rain fall. Those 5 minutes felt more real than anything else in James's life. But secrets in palaces never stay secret forever. The Queen had spies everywhere. Ladies who watched. Guards who reported. Servants who listened at doors. 10 months after the lockdown, Charlotte made a mistake. She wrote a real letter. Not a small note in a book. A real letter on her personal stationery. She wrote about her feelings. About loving someone she could never have. About wanting to run away. She wrote James's name. Charlotte hid the letter in a box under her bed. But her head lady, Mrs. Pemberton, found it while organizing Charlotte's room. Mrs. Pemberton was loyal to the Queen, not to Charlotte. She took the letter directly to Her Majesty. The Queen read the letter in her private office. Her face turned red with anger. She called the head of security immediately. "Captain Worthington is to be transferred," the Queen said, her voice cold as ice. "Immediately. Send him to the North Estate. He is never to be in the same building as Princess Charlotte again. Never to speak to her. Never to write to her. If he tries, arrest him." The head of security nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. And bring my daughter to me. Now." That afternoon, James was called into an office. His supervisor told him he was being transferred. No explanation. No warning. Just orders. James knew immediately what had happened. Someone had discovered their secret. "When do I leave?" James asked, his voice empty. "Today. Pack your things. A car is waiting." James packed his small room in 30 minutes. He wanted to see Charlotte one last time. To say goodbye. To tell her this was not her fault. But guards watched him constantly. He was escorted to the car like a prisoner. As the car drove away from the palace, James looked back at the building. Somewhere in those walls, Charlotte was being punished too. He knew it. He felt it. And there was nothing he could do. The woman he loved was being forced to marry another man. And he could not even tell her goodbye. Charlotte sat in her bedroom and stared at the wall. She had been sitting like this for 3 hours. She did not cry anymore. She had no tears left. Her eyes felt dry and empty, just like her heart. The Queen had screamed at her for 2 hours yesterday. Charlotte had never seen her mother so angry. The Queen called her foolish and selfish and stupid. She said Charlotte had embarrassed the family. She said a princess falling in love with a guard was disgusting and shameful. "You are not a normal girl," the Queen had shouted. "You are royal blood. You do not get to choose who you love. Your marriage to Duke Edward has been planned for years. It will happen. You will smile. You will behave. And you will forget that guard ever existed." Charlotte tried to explain. She tried to say that she did not choose to fall in love. That it just happened. That James was a good man who treated her with kindness and respect. But the Queen would not listen. "I do not care if he is a good man," the Queen said coldly. "He is not royal. He is nothing. And you will never see him again. Do you understand me?" Charlotte understood. She understood that her life was not her own. She understood that her feelings did not matter. She understood that she was property, not a person. Now she sat in her room like a prisoner. The Queen had assigned 3 new ladies to watch her constantly. These ladies were not friendly. They did not chat or laugh. They just watched. Charlotte could not go anywhere alone. Not to the library. Not to the gardens. Not even to the bathroom without someone standing outside the door. Her phone was taken away. Her computer was removed. She was allowed to read books, but only books that the ladies approved first. They checked every page to make sure there were no notes hidden inside. Charlotte asked about James once. "Where did he go?" she asked quietly. You are not allowed to speak his name, one of the ladies said sharply. The Queen's orders. So Charlotte stopped asking. But she thought about him every minute of every day. Was he okay? Was he thinking about her too? Did he hate her for getting him in trouble? She would never know the answers. The wedding preparations continued like nothing had happened. Designers brought dresses for Charlotte to try on. She stood like a mannequin while they pinned and measured. The dresses were beautiful. White silk and lace and tiny pearls. Charlotte hated all of them. Duke Edward came to visit twice. He was 32 years old, tall and handsome in a boring way. He had perfect manners and a perfect smile. He talked about hunting and polo and his estate in the countryside. He never asked Charlotte what she liked. He never asked if she was happy. He just talked and smiled and expected her to agree with everything. You will make a lovely bride, Edward said during his second visit. My mother is very pleased with this match. Charlotte wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. She wanted to run away. But she just nodded and smiled. Thank you, she said in a flat voice. Edward did not notice that she was dying inside. He probably did not care. At night, Charlotte lay in her bed and could not sleep. The room felt too big and too empty. She thought about James standing in hallways, about his gray eyes and his quiet voice, about the way his hand felt when they touched for 1 second, about the notes they wrote to each other in books. Those notes were gone now. The Queen had burned them all. Charlotte stopped eating much. Food tasted like sand in her mouth. Her ladies noticed and reported it to the Queen. The Queen sent a doctor. The doctor examined Charlotte and said she was healthy, just sad. The Queen told the doctor to give Charlotte vitamins and exercise. As if vitamins could fix a broken heart. Weeks passed like this, then months. Charlotte became thinner and paler. Her eyes looked hollow. She smiled when required, but the smiles never reached her eyes. People at the palace whispered about her. The princess looks unwell, they said. The princess looks like a ghost. James tried to contact Charlotte twice from the North Estate. The first time he wrote a letter. The letter was intercepted by security and never delivered. James received a warning. Do not try again, the security chief told him, or you will lose your job and possibly face charges. The second time, James called the palace and asked to speak with Princess Charlotte. The operator laughed at him. Guards do not speak with princesses, she said and hung up. James felt helpless and angry. He wanted to storm the palace and take Charlotte away, but that was a fantasy. In real life he was powerless. He was just a guard. She was a princess. The world would never let them be together. So James did his job at the North Estate. He stood in hallways. He walked through gardens. He checked doors and windows. But everything felt meaningless now. He was alive but not living. Just going through motions like a robot. 3 months before the wedding, Charlotte's health got worse. She started having headaches. Sharp pains in her chest. Dizziness. The doctor examined her again. He ran tests. Everything came back normal. It is stress, the doctor told the Queen. The wedding preparations are overwhelming her. She needs rest. But Charlotte did not need rest. She needed hope. And she had none. The Queen planned a huge engagement celebration. 800 guests. The finest food and wine. Charlotte would make a speech announcing her official engagement to Duke Edward. The wedding date would be announced. Everything would become final and real. Charlotte begged her mother to cancel the celebration. Please, she said. I cannot do this. I do not love him. Please do not make me do this. The Queen's face was stone. You will attend. You will smile. You will read your speech. And then you will marry Duke Edward as planned. This conversation is over. Charlotte knew she had lost. There was no escape. No hope. No future worth living. She would marry Edward. She would smile for cameras. She would produce royal children. And she would die slowly inside for the rest of her life. The morning of the engagement celebration arrived. Charlotte put on the red dress with gold embroidery. She let the ladies fix her hair and makeup. She looked in the mirror and saw a beautiful corpse looking back. The grand ballroom sparkled like a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, throwing rainbow light across the white marble floors. Gold decorations covered every wall. Fresh flowers filled huge vases, their sweet smell mixing with expensive perfume. 800 guests wore their finest clothes. Diamonds glittered on necks and wrists. Everyone smiled and laughed and drank champagne. Charlotte stood near the front of the room, wearing her red dress with gold embroidery. Duke Edward stood beside her, looking proud and happy. He kept touching her arm like she was his property. Charlotte felt sick every time he touched her. The queen sat on a special chair that looked almost like a throne. She watched everything with sharp eyes. She looked satisfied. Everything was going according to her plan. Her problem daughter would marry the right man. The scandal with the guard would be forgotten. Order would be restored. Charlotte's hands shook. She held them together tightly so nobody would notice. Her head hurt. Her chest felt tight. She could not take a full breath. The room felt too hot and too crowded. All these people staring at her. All these fake smiles. All these expectations pressing down on her like heavy stones. "Are you ready for your speech, my dear?" Edward asked. He did not really look at her when he spoke. He looked at the crowd, making sure important people saw him with his princess bride. "Yes," Charlotte lied. Her voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. A servant brought Charlotte a paper with her speech written on it. She had not written the speech herself. The Queen's advisors wrote it. Charlotte read it once yesterday. It was full of words like duty and honor and grateful and blessed. None of the words felt true. But she would read them anyway because she had no choice. The music stopped. A man in a fancy suit walked to the front. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly, "Her Royal Highness Princess Charlotte will now speak." Everyone clapped. Charlotte walked to the microphone on shaking legs. Edward stayed beside her, still smiling his perfect smile. Charlotte looked down at the paper in her hands. The words blurred. She blinked hard and the words came back into focus. "Thank you all for being here today," Charlotte began. Her voice sounded strange through the speakers. "This is a very special occasion for me and for Duke Edward." She paused. She was supposed to look at Edward and smile. She forced herself to do it. Edward smiled back. His smile did not reach his eyes. He did not love her either. He just wanted the title of princess consort. He wanted the power and money that came with marrying a royal. "I stand before you to announce our official engagement," Charlotte continued reading. "It is my duty and honor to unite our families through this marriage." Duty. Honor. The same empty words everyone always used. Charlotte felt anger rise in her throat. Was this all her life would ever be? Duty and honor and doing what others told her to do? Her eyes lifted from the paper. They moved across the crowd without thinking. She was looking for something. Someone. But James was far away at the North Estate. He could not be here. She would never see him again. But then her eyes found him. Standing against the wall with the other guards. James was here. In this room. Looking directly at her. Charlotte's heart stopped. Then it started beating so fast she thought it might explode. James looked thinner. Tired. Set. But he was here. How was he here? Why was he here? James had not been able to stay away. When he heard about the engagement celebration, something broke inside him. He could not let Charlotte do this without seeing her one last time. He traded shifts with another guard. He lied about his assignment. He snuck into the ballroom and stood with the other guards lining the walls. It was stupid and dangerous. He would probably lose his job. But he did not care anymore. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Time seemed to stop. All the noise and people disappeared. There was only Charlotte and James, looking at each other like drowning people reaching for air. Everything Charlotte had been holding inside for 3 months rose up at once. The loneliness, the fear, the grief, the love she could never speak, the life she could never have. It was too much, too heavy, too painful. Charlotte tried to keep reading her speech. "I am grateful for." The words died in her throat. Her vision went blurry. Not from tears. From something else. Something wrong. Pain shot through her chest like a knife. Sharp and hot and terrifying. Charlotte's hand went to her chest. She could not breathe. The paper fell from her other hand and floated to the floor. The room tilted sideways. "Charlotte," Edward said. He sounded annoyed, not concerned. Like she was embarrassing him on purpose. Charlotte tried to answer but no words came. The pain in her chest spread. Her whole body felt like it was on fire from the inside. Something was very wrong. Something in her body was breaking. She had been born with a weak blood vessel near her heart. The doctors never found it because it never caused problems before. But 3 months of not eating, not sleeping, and constant stress had weakened it more. And now, at this exact moment, with her heart beating so fast from seeing James, the blood vessel tore. Blood poured into her chest cavity. Charlotte could not understand what was happening. She just knew she was dying. Her legs gave out. She stumbled forward. People gasped. Hands reached for her but missed. Charlotte fell. The marble floor rushed up to meet her. She hit hard. The impact sent more pain through her body. Her beautiful red dress began to darken. But nobody could tell at first because the dress was already red. The blood blended in. Charlotte lay on the cold floor. Faces appeared above her. Shocked faces. Scared faces. Edward's face looking confused. The Queen's face looking angry. But Charlotte did not care about any of them. Her eyes found James. He stood frozen against the wall. Every muscle in his body was locked tight. His face showed pure terror. Charlotte raised one shaking hand toward him. She tried to speak but blood filled her mouth. "James?" she whispered. Blood ran down her chin. "James, please." That whisper broke through the chaos. Several people heard her say the name. They turned to see who she was calling. They saw the guard standing against the wall. They saw the look on his face. Understanding dawned in their eyes. The secret was no longer secret. James did not think. He just moved. His feet carried him forward before his brain could stop them. Every rule he ever learned disappeared. Every order. Every protocol. Every warning. None of it mattered anymore. The woman he loved was dying on the floor. Nothing else existed. James pushed through the crowd. People shouted at him. Other guards tried to grab him. He shoved them away. He was stronger than he looked. Years of training made his body fast and powerful. Nobody could stop him. He dropped to his knees beside Charlotte. His hands shook as he lifted her head gently. Blood covered her chin. Her red dress was soaked with more blood. Her green eyes looked up at him, full of pain and fear. "I'm here," James said. Tears ran down his face. He did not care who saw. "I'm here, Charlotte. I won't leave you." Charlotte's fingers gripped his uniform. "James," she whispered. "It hurts." I know. Help is coming. Just stay with me. Please stay with me." The Queen stood up from her chair. Her face was white with shock and then red with rage. "Get that man away from my daughter," she screamed. "Guards, remove him immediately." 4 guards rushed forward. They grabbed James's arms and tried to pull him away. But Charlotte held on to his uniform with surprising strength. "No," she gasped. "Don't take him. Please, don't take him away from me." The guards hesitated. They looked at the Queen. They looked at Charlotte. They did not know what to do. A dying princess was begging them to let the guards stay. Duke Edward stood frozen, his perfect smile finally gone. He stared at Charlotte and James like he could not understand what he was seeing. "What is happening?" he asked stupidly. "Charlotte, what is this?" Nobody answered him. The palace doctor pushed through the crowd, carrying his medical bag. 2 nurses came behind him. They knelt beside Charlotte and began checking her vital signs. "Internal bleeding," the doctor said quickly. "Severe. We need to get her to the hospital now." "Where are the paramedics?" "They are coming," someone shouted. 2 minutes away. 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. James held Charlotte's hand tightly. He whispered to her constantly. "Stay with me. Keep breathing. You're going to be okay. I love you. I love you so much. Please don't leave me." Charlotte's eyes stayed on his face. As long as she could see him, she could keep fighting. "I love you too," she whispered. "I should have said it before. I love you, James." The Queen heard those words. Everyone in the room heard them. The secret was completely exposed now. There was no hiding it anymore. The paramedics burst through the doors with a stretcher. They moved fast and efficiently. They put a breathing mask on Charlotte's face. They started in 4 in her arm. They worked together to lift her onto the stretcher. "I'm coming with her," James said. It was not a question. It was a statement. "You are not family," one paramedic said. "Only family can ride in the ambulance." "Then arrest me later," James said. "But I am not leaving her." He climbed into the ambulance before anyone could stop him. The paramedics looked at each other. They looked at Charlotte, who still held James's hand. They made a decision. "Fine," the head paramedic said. "But stay out of our way." The ambulance doors closed. The siren started. They raced toward the hospital. Inside, the paramedics worked on Charlotte. James sat beside her, holding her hand, praying to every god he could think of. At the hospital, doctors rushed Charlotte into emergency surgery. James was forced to stay in the waiting room. He paced back and forth for 4 hours. His uniform was covered in Charlotte's blood. His face was streaked with dried tears. He did not care how he looked. The Queen arrived at the hospital 1 hour after Charlotte went into surgery. She found James in the waiting room. Her face was cold and hard. "This is your fault," the Queen said. Her voice was like ice. "You did this to her." James turned to face her. For the first time in 12 years he was not afraid of the Queen. "No," he said firmly. "You did this to her. You broke her heart. You tried to force her into a life she did not want. You cared more about duty than about your own daughter's happiness. The Queen's mouth opened in shock. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this before. I love Charlotte, James continued. I would die for her. Can Duke Edward say the same? Can you? The Queen had no answer. She sat down heavily in a chair. For the first time she looked old and tired. Maybe she was finally understanding what she had done. After 6 hours, a surgeon came out. His face was serious but not sad. Princess Charlotte is alive, he said. The surgery was successful. She lost a lot of blood, but we repaired the damaged vessel. She will recover fully. James felt his legs go weak with relief. He sat down hard. Can I see her? The surgeon looked at the Queen. The Queen looked at James. Something had changed in her eyes. Something had softened. Yes, the Queen said quietly. You can see her. James walked into Charlotte's hospital room. She was sleeping, her face pale against the white pillows. Machines beeped steadily. Tubes ran into her arms. But she was alive. She was breathing. James sat beside her bed. He took her hand gently. I'm here, he whispered. I'll always be here. Charlotte's eyes opened slowly. When she saw James, she smiled. A real smile. The first real smile in 3 months. You stayed, she said softly. I'll always stay, James promised. If you'll have me. Yes, Charlotte said. Yes, yes, yes. The Queen stood in the doorway watching them. She thought about duty and honor and royal blood. Then she thought about her daughter almost dying. About the look on Charlotte's face when she saw James. About real love versus arranged marriages. Maybe some things were more important than tradition. James Worthington, the Queen said from the doorway. James stood up quickly, old habits returning. Yes, Your Majesty. My daughter loves you. That is clear. And you love her. That is also clear. The Queen paused. I cannot change who you are. You will never be royal. This will cause scandal. But, she took a deep breath. I would rather have a happy daughter married to a guard than a dead daughter married to a duke. James could not believe what he was hearing. Charlotte squeezed his hand tight. There will be conditions, the Queen continued. Rules, protocols. But if you truly love my daughter, I will not stand in your way anymore. Charlotte started crying. Happy tears this time. James knelt beside her bed and kissed her hand. 1 year later, they married in a small private ceremony. No 800 guests. No grand ballroom. Just family and close friends. Charlotte wore a simple white dress. James wore his best suit. They said their vows with tears in their eyes and joy in their hearts. The newspapers called it the greatest royal scandal in history. But Charlotte and James did not care what the newspapers said. They had each other. They had chosen love over duty. And they would live happily, finally free.